All right, and so we have public comment on two items, item 5K and 5P. So let's go ahead and hear those public comments before we take a vote.
Madison.
All right, am I on?
Yeah, you are. I didn't recognize your name because it wasn't your name, Todd Madison. So Todd, you're up. You have 3 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll change that for next time. Sorry about that. All right. So I thought I'd highlight some things from the report that I brought up in the past. First, I thank the Personnel Commission for their service on this. I know what it's like to serve on such committees. It takes dedication and a willingness to help. Appreciate that. Looking at the data, I see some interesting things. In every regular board meeting, we see personnel orders. This meeting has them. If we look at the report section on personnel actions, virtually all the statistics and categories that match what's reported in the orders do not match the numbers reported in this report. For example, under resignations, we see 70 listed in the report, but if one totals up the orders for fiscal 2021, there are 65 in classified staff, 31 in certificated, for a total of 96 resignations. Ditto for retirements, which show 27 on this report and a total of 62 in the PAOs. I'm not sure if this report is incorrect or if the PAOs are incorrect or if there's just some difference in reporting periods that I'm not seeing here. Using the data in this report to look at the hiring process, we see the district posted 64 jobs last year and had a total of 951 applications, which is about 15 applications per job. It doesn't really seem like OUSD has a problem getting people to apply for jobs when they're open, at least last year. Farther down, we see the applicants were tested, 330 of them passed. I assume this represents the final pool of qualified applicants to be interviewed for selection, and that means about 5 qualified people applied for every open job. Having hired hundreds in my career, I can tell you that getting 5 qualified people to apply for every open position is hardly a sign of difficulty in hiring. Most of the time, aside from the Great Recession, my HR department would love to have had 5 people to send to me for interviews. Is this the teacher shortage Eleanor mentioned, or perhaps that's a myth? The report is noticeably missing some very key numbers that any management interested in making good financial decisions would have: exit interview data. I've spoken about this before. The idea that the district doesn't really care enough about why people leave to ask them is a bit mystifying. Perhaps because they would find out very few OUSD employees are leaving for better pay elsewhere, maybe close to zero. The point here is one that I've made many times before. Any business that gets 5 applicants for position and doesn't have people leaving for better pay elsewhere doesn't have a problem with pay levels. That much is obvious. A district that uses a supposed problem with hiring and retention as a reason to give itself huge extra bonus raises when the data shows differently, especially when that means it will become necessary to cut from our kids, is obviously engaging in financial mismanagement. The bottom line is, if you're going to take candy from our babies to give to yourselves, you may want to work on the cover story a little bit better. School choice is the answer. CaliforniaSchoolChoice.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have another public comment on 5P.
Madison.
Oh, unmuted again. Great. Thank you. So to me, a budget dweeb like me, this is probably the most interesting item on the agenda tonight. For the benefit of those watching, the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistant Team, which is commonly called FCMAT, is a state entity brought in when a district is in dire financial condition. FCMAT was brought in to unravel Sweetwater's financial disaster when the district was on the verge of bankruptcy and put under state and county control. Sweetwater's problems are amazingly similar to Oceanside Unified's. Their financial crisis was caused by a priority given to their own pay, regardless of whether it was best for the district or the kids. FCMAT found the district misrepresented its financial position, possibly to the extent of fraud, to justify giving itself extra bonus raises. Now, in Oceanside's case, I would not expect any fraud, but the problem is the same: a district in financial trouble ignoring its deficit to give itself extra bonus raises. Similar problem, similar cause. I'm not quite sure why it takes FCMAT to identify this for the district. The County Office of Education already told the district in September that they were going to have to identify up to $30 million in future cuts in order to avoid being taken over. The district's response was to throw another log on the fire, give itself extra bonus raises in October, adding $10 million to that number. We know this story. I'm missing how that makes sense, but I'm sure it makes sense to the people benefiting from those raises, including a superintendent who will see total compensation go from $340,000 to $355,000, an administrative staff that will go from a median $164,000 to $172,000, and of course the president of the teachers union, whose total compensation will go up from $194,000 to $203,000 a year. It seems like that works. Well, maybe for everybody but our kids. We have a CBO with total compensation that is now likely around $223,000 and a director of budget likely around $160K. Do we not have the expertise to figure this out ourselves? In the last meeting, we heard how we would close the budget gap by, quote, finding efficiencies, and the money would be found, quote, elsewhere. The deficit hole is equal to almost every dollar the district spends on education outside pay and benefits. If we can find $30 million by turning off the lights in the gym when they're not in use, that would be great, but it's very unlikely. Is the elsewhere mentioned perhaps underneath couch cushions in the administrative offices? It would be interesting to see what FCMAT says. Perhaps the entire point here is to have FCMAT do the dirty work, to tell the district what they feel should be cut so that the district comes here to the board meeting to lay off people or cut some other expense that impacts our kids' education. They can say, we don't want to do this. It's FCMAT forcing us to. Is all this an exercise in CYA? School choice is the answer, californiaschoolchoice.org. Thank you.
All right, that concludes our public comment for item 5. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, we have a first and a second. Let's hear public comment.
Tiffany Ketchum and Lisa Farrell.
Hello, Tiffany. You have 3 minutes for public comment, and you're up when you're ready.
Good evening, board. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Tiffany Ketchum, and we've been with OUSD for over 15 years with multiple kids with special needs. I strongly believe in open communication and collaboration between parents, teachers, and admins. I'm the head admin for the Facebook group OUSD Parent Teacher Collective. We value sharing information and support for all issues our district, families, and teachers face, as well as linking us all into what's going on into our local community, because we believe it's better with more people getting involved. I want to thank the board for holding the meetings virtually in an equitable way that still allows us all to participate in public comments. We appreciate the Zoom access to meetings. As being an immune-compromised family and disabled, it's a huge risk to be in person online. To be in person. So online gives me access. Otherwise, I can't be there at all right now. And other people that are trying to stay well are possibly in the same situation. I'd like to ask the board to consider what type of meeting is actually getting the most participants joining, because that should weigh in heavily. I apologize, I'm a little shaking. That should weigh into what is working best during this time, plus what is accessible to all who want to participate without in-person capacity limits. As I've personally seen concerned parents and teachers be denied access to meetings when a hot topic has caused a meeting to exceed fire code occupancy limits. During in-person meetings, it's evident that people are not following mask use, even though they're on school property, and that's too unsafe for us. When the meetings are done in person, but it's being aired on the public service channels, those of us at home watching cannot comment, and that is not equitable or fair. I appreciate the TV access to the in-person meetings to at least be able to see, although I don't get that channel as we don't have cable. So I have to watch online. But if the meetings go back to in-person, there needs to be a way for people that are medically fragile or can't be there physically due to disability or sickness, etc., to be able to comment. The way the rules are currently, I've seen it bar others from comment because they are not there in person, and it has prohibited me from doing so as well. I think this is a time where we should expand access, not restrict it. Meetings should be accessible, whether you're able-bodied, bed-bound, quarantining, disabled, at work, or even in the car. There are people that can be quarantining or recovering from COVID and could be well enough to comment virtually, but should not be coming to the location in person. Whatever is decided going forward must be fully accessible and safe for all at this time. Thanks for listening and considering what I've shared. If you can please publicly answer this, what is the participation numbers in virtual format versus in-person meetings? Thank you again.
Thank you, Tiffany. Our next speaker.
Hi, good evening. I completely agree with everything Tiffany just said. Good evening, school board members and Dr. Vitale. My name is Lisa Farrell. I'm a parent of a Reynolds student and a 10-month-old future OUSD student. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you virtually tonight. During COVID, we were all forced to learn Zoom out of necessity, but there's been some great benefits to transitioning to these virtual meetings. We've seen increased participation in board meetings and parent meetings because of the increased accessibility for families. Families no longer have to have the privilege of time or transportation to travel across town for an in-person meeting just to be able to participate. Recently, there were several facilities meetings regarding Reynolds, my son's school, and I was able to attend all of these meetings because they were virtual. As a working parent and the parent of a baby, I would not have been able to attend all of them if they had been in person. Before COVID, I frequently attended board meetings and DPAC meetings. And in the winter time, especially, these meetings only had a handful of parents in attendance. Online, parents have been able to attend, hundreds of parents have been able to attend board meetings and participate by making public comments. Just broadcasting them, like Tiffany said, doesn't give parents the ability to participate and comment publicly. So please continue with the virtual format to give parents a greater ability to stay informed and participate in their children's education. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we're to our final agenda item, our favorite one. This is public comments on non-agenda items. We are happy to receive comments about items and issues on tonight's agenda, as well as topics that do not appear on the agenda. Each person has 3 minutes, and I will turn it over to Mrs. Givens to call people up.
Okay, we have 5 public comments. Todd Madison, Rosie Higuera, Judy Hurd, Susan Custer, and Brad Tobias. We'll start with Mr. Madison.
All right, thanks, Ann. I appreciate that. In the last meeting, we heard from the president of the teachers union, Tiffany Ortega, who seemed upset I had highlighted the effect of the recent extra bonus raises on her own compensation. Apparently, it's off limits to point out the person responsible for the negotiations resulting in those raises stood to increase her total compensation from $194,000 to $203,000 a year. I appreciate her recap of all the good things she does for the district. I'm not quite sure who that was addressed to. I've never questioned her abilities or dedication to teaching. I assume she must have had questions about that come up elsewhere. I'm sure she's a great teacher, a good person, does exceptional work with our kids, and in her spare time helps little old ladies cross the street. I have no reason to believe any of that is not true. Just like there's no reason to believe that her total compensation for 2020, as listed in the pay record, is obtained through a legal public records request to Oceanside Unified, shows she did indeed receive $194,311 in total compensation. Unlike Ms. Ortega, I do not believe the district responded to a legal public records request in an illegal manner. I'm not going to accuse the district of that, even if Ms. Ortega is. Since we can assume Ms. Ortega would make sure she knew how much her total compensation is before speaking, that would mean either Ms. Ortega is not aware of her compensation or spent 3 minutes lying to the board and the public. Could this be to deflect from criticism about enormous raises that will require cuts from our kids? Taking candy from babies, in other words? Is lying to the board and the public allowable under the district's ethics or code of conduct? Will we see any disciplinary action being taken? Meanwhile, on to how do we fix problems like this, with apologies to Eleanor for the repetition she saw me give this talk last night. School choice is the answer, of course. Californians for School Choice now has its petition out, gathering signatures to get on the ballot in November 2022. We're going to take all the funding the state provides for K-12 education, split it up, that's about $14,000 per student this year, and put it into a trust account to be applied to tuition at any accredited school. If a parent likes their public or charter school, they can stay there, nothing changes. We're simply allowing parents who disagree with the way our schools are run to choose something else for their kids. And if the option chosen costs less than $14,000, the remainder accumulates and can be used for college or vocational education after graduation. If a parent is homeschooling on a private affidavit and has no tuition cost, they could end up with over $180,000 per child to spend on that education with no increase in taxes. How could we craft a better plan for our kids? Join us by going to californiaschoolchoice.org and adding your name to our email distribution so you can be notified when we're going to be somewhere in your area collecting signatures. You can even volunteer to help in that effort, and I'll connect with you to find ways to do that. That's californiaschoolchoice.org, californiaschoolchoice.org. We can make our schools pay attention to parents. We can do this. Thank you.
Boy. Oh boy.
Next speaker, Rosie Figueroa.
Yes, hi. I am a parent of Oceanside kids that have already graduated, but it looks like this school board needs oversight, and they need parents to be monitoring their actions, because you are not working in favor of our kids, and you do not represent our community or the values in our community. We are not for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Eleanor, I'm not sure why you felt the need to go to an LGBTQ meeting when that is the minority and not the majority. Why are we catering to the minority? Also, the CRT, the critical race theory, it is not something that we want taught to our children. We reject all of this racism and communist ideology. Also, this ethnic studies has no business in our schools. This is something that is maybe appropriate for high schoolers or college, but it has no business being taught to our students, as it is divisive and it is not something that we want for our kids. We need to bring our kids back to learning things that they can actually use in real life, such as balancing a checkbook. We need to also teach them things like respect for parents and authority, the Constitution, and how our constitutional rights are getting stripped from us. We, as parents, we also reject this idea that schools, school boards, and children have rights when it comes to medical issues, such as getting an abortion without parental consent. That is absolute BS and hogwash. And also wanted to touch on this raise, superintendent, that you seem to have given yourself of $345,000. That is absolutely despicable. And the board, Blessing, Eleanor, Raquel, you all have a responsibility to these families to be the checks and balances for Vitaly. And if you're not doing that, then you need to resign from your position, because you're doing a disservice to the families here. And so parents are getting really fed up with the way you guys are running things. You're not in the interest of our children. It's obvious with all of these crazy curriculums that you are approving of, that is detrimental to families and to our community. And so we're coming after your seats, board members. Either do your job or move out of the way. And that's all I have to say.
I did just want to take a second before we move on to the next comment that our students who are LGBTQ deserve to be recognized as affirmed as part of our district, and we do not stand by any comments to disparage them or participation in any activities that look to affirm their existence as vital to the future of our district. So I just want to say that before we move on. Thank you.
I also want to add that I was invited to that and was no cost to the district, if you're implying that. Thank you.
Next speaker will be Susan Custer.
Susan, you're up. Let's try the next speaker and come back to Susan. Who's next?
Add Tobias.
Hello, Brad.
Hello, and good evening, and thank you for this time to speak about what I want to talk about. So the first thing is, I might be kind of late in this, as you've already talked about voting on the platform for these meetings, via Zoom or not. But in my opinion, get off Zoom. I checked today. The COVID rates are down. They're going down, and they've been going down since September. It's not a big COVID. Yes, it's out there, but we shouldn't be afraid to hold in-person meetings. As an example, as of on Sunday night, there's a night of worship down at Oceanside Amphitheater. There's over 1,000 people there. No social distancing, no mask. Everything was fine. They weren't afraid. My church regularly has as many people, actually, if probably more, than there are in-person Oceanside meetings. They're at Chavez Middle School. So if that can't happen, then I suggest doing like a hybrid method where you're in person KOTC and also Zoom. That way you can go ahead and reach the maximum amount of people so they can understand what's going on within our district. Another thing on this topic is let's have a question and answer session to the public, where us as parents can ask you guys questions, and you guys can answer them. I brought this up to you in a private meeting with Dr. Vitale, and she basically shut it down. Basically said it's not going to happen. I feel like it needs to happen. My second point: balance the budget. As it was stated last meeting, the district is going to be in the red big time. Tens of millions of dollars. All right, that's unacceptable, completely unacceptable. And eventually, all these COVID type fundings, the ESSERs, the CARES, the other grants, they're going to go away. So, in that, being in the red, not good. So, in short, if you're not balance the budget, then you have failed us in your jobs, and you need to be replaced or recalled. Thank you for the time.
Susan Custer.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Susan.
Okay. I'd like to talk about on page 12 of the Ethnic Studies course outline, unit number 11, whiteness. It's first I'd like to say what the definition of whiteness is, according to Nikki Cole. In sociology, whiteness is defined as the characteristics and experiences generally associated with being a member of the white race and having white skin. Whiteness comes with a wide variety of privileges. Again, she says whiteness comes with a wide variety of privileges. So in the outline, it says that you will study what is the history of whiteness as a racial category and white privileges that are tied to, and what privileges are tied to whiteness. So the question I have is, why are we so focused on emphasizing to the kids of all races that white people have privileges that others do not? It would seem we want kids to look at each other as equal, no matter what their color is. When I grew up in the South in the 60s, that's what we were taught. Supposedly, the South comes with a lot of racism back in the 50s and 60s. The school I went to, the neighborhood I was in, we were taught to accept all. There were mixed races there, and we were taught to accept them and get along. Later it says, again on page 12 under whiteness, students will participate in a simulation where they will be asked a series of questions and be asked to take one step forward if they can answer yes to the prompts. The prompts will be centered around scenarios where being white gives you power or privilege. So the prompts are centered around scenarios where being white gives you power or privilege. That is a direct quote from the Oceanside Unified School District course outline. So you are focusing on proving to all the kids that being white gives you privileges. A few questions, I'm not sure which questions you'll be using, but a few questions that I found in some of these type of quizzes online are: if you grew up with people of color or working.
Thank you, Susan, for your comments.